Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your habits, your network, and more. I'm Aaron Hayslip. I'm one of your co-hosts, and today I am joined by Peter Elbaum. Peter and I together help run Parsity, our online code school, as well as a few other of our own side projects. We're going to catch you up on all of those things, as well as some other fun things that are happening in our lives and the way we're approaching this whole career thing. So hopefully you enjoy. All right, man. Well, it's Monday morning as we record. I guess for you it's 11:34.
Yep.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. So you said a few ideas for. We're still trying to figure out what do we talk about during these monthly things. I will start by saying that for some act of God that's beyond me, like our podcast is growing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Man. I think this last month we finally hit like an all-time high. Every month we hit an all-time high, which is crazy to me. But we had about 1,200 more downloads this month than we did last month. And I think we're tracking like 10,000 monthly downloads now, which is cool to me. So
yeah.
Shout out to all of y'all who are listening. And that's not like a super big podcast, but that's bigger than I ever thought we would get.
Yeah, it's very cool. I wonder what we can attribute that to. My gut is that part of it is kind of the power of having a catalog. People with YouTube talk about that a lot, where it's like when you have this library of content, if someone finds an entry point, one episode or whatever they like, then there's all these other things they can listen to. But I don't know. And then we have a few winners, right, that come up a lot in search results.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like episode 1, Why People Fail Coding Boot Camps. Number 9, A Complete Guide to Learning JavaScript. And then, those are like our far and above anchors. And I lazily but literally just reposted the other day that JavaScript one whenever I didn't have an episode. But even like the ones where the weekly downloads are now getting up there, which is cool. So hopefully we're adding value to people's journeys.
Something. I don't know. Get pretty good feedback. So thank you to everyone out there who's listening. Yeah,
for sure. Man, what's new with you? I think we keep on tracking Peter's career in terms. So you recently started something new, a new contract.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going compared to the last one?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. We talked a little bit about this on the last episode, but it's crazy. One big takeaway for me is it's crazy the difference that good project management makes. Nothing against the former contract, but as a startup, things are kind of like not fully ironed out in terms of roadmap and who has the final say over what are the decisions getting made, what are the features we're building. And this new job is on a 4-year-old code base with a long-running client where they have kind of their communication cadence down and their planning and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's easy, especially for technical people, to kind of overlook the product manager, the project manager, and be like, admin. But it makes a huge difference when it's done well. And so, the new contract has been great. It's fitting in pretty much perfectly to my arrangement of things.
Yeah, I've experienced that before where, all the engineers like complain about the PM and how, they don't even know how to code. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have one, you realize just how valuable they are, that they're able to really make everyone efficient. So you can show up and basically do the thing that you're really good at. It's so nice. So I'm glad you get that. Yeah,
for sure. Any updates in your world?
Man, I feel like everything's constantly evolving. It's hard. I think we've talked about this. Some of what I'm working on is hard to share. I can talk about DevMet for a minute. I think so. Primarily, I feel like Brian and Scott, two guys that I work with, are doing most of the work. Scott is an old friend we brought in to kind of do a lot of, I guess, sales type work. Really, his main focus was to place our first 3 graduates, and it's morphed. And so I'm curious how DevMint is going to evolve, because I think our original understanding of it was we were going to turn Web 2 developers into Web 3 developers, which we are, and that's been successful. Like, one of the guys was working at Ford as a Web 2 developer. Then they transitioned him onto their NFT project, which is really cool. Excuse me. But I think what's hard is the market changed, obviously, right? Where companies are not necessarily willing to pay as much, because our model was that companies would pay us to place our graduates. And we still have a lot that are signing on to do that, but we're also realizing that the folks that we attracted are, they're entrepreneurs. They want to start their own thing. So we have sort of spun off what we're calling Venture Mint. This is kind of crazy, which is basically a Web3 startup incubator.
Oh, that's pretty sick.
So a couple of our students had some killer ideas, and we're even getting a lot of buzz around these killer ideas. And so Brian was like, hey, because Brian's done this before where he's advised Web3 companies, which is really crazy to me, by the way, where he's advised he had this one company he was advising, and they gave him some very, 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 very small percentage of equity. And then Brian basically over-delivered and found them their CTO and all this other kind of stuff. And they were like, oh, we should probably give you more equity. And Brian was like, yep, you probably should. So anyways, he's kind of doing that now for what we're going to be calling Venture Mint, I think. I don't know if that's actually going to be the name or not. I just thought it sounded better than DevMint Venture Labs or something like that. So we'll see, man. And then I think the other thing we're thinking about is, now that we have Scott, who is just a really charismatic, dynamic figure, he's the kind of guy who, if I have an idea, I will think on it, research, write about it, build stuff, whatever. But if he has an idea, he'll go talk to 10 people, right? He just has he's an extrovert. He gets energy from that. So I think what we're realizing is maybe the win here for us is more or less corporate training. Which, probably not so much in a corporate sense, because there's not a lot of Web3 quote corporations, right?
Right.
But
for
the
Web 2 organizations, maybe.
Yeah, the idea being there are so many organizations that wish they had an internal boot camp where they could basically get their Web 2 senior developers up and going on blockchain tech. But I mean, I'd say it's really, 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 really hard for a company to build that themselves. But we've built it, right? And it's super effective. So that's kind of the thing we're looking at too, is okay, we've had a few tell us, yes, we want you to do this for us. But is that going to be the business model going forward? So I don't know. It's still, the thing I like about doing this, honestly, is, which is also can be draining, is the fact that no one's being paid, no one's taking any kind of money, so it's it can't die, we can just quit. That's the only real risk. Otherwise it's just kind of fun, we do evening check-ins every once in a while. It's really async. No one's really beholden to anything other than hey, if you want to be part of it, you show up and just contribute something, So
yeah,
that's been us. It's been fun to have two other people to kind of bounce stuff off of, but yeah, we'll see.
That's cool. I like this idea of kind of business as an art form. You kind of seem like you're heading in this direction where it's some people paint paintings, you're starting businesses, and it's fun, and it's kind of a medium for expressing creativity in some sense. I think of Peter Levels, who has Nomad List and is constantly spinning up these ideas, and it's just a creative outlet almost.
Yeah, except for he's super successful and rich and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that, because I do think, over the years, you hear people on social or wherever talk about honing your craft. And I've always tried to figure out what my craft is. And, I was like, oh, maybe it's coding, right? And to be honest with you, like no matter how hard I try, and I've heard people talk about this before too, like it's not just me. I'm not going to be the best developer, right? Like there's those developers who are like quote 10x developers, and in some ways they just are, And so it's like, all right, it's not that. It's not writing, although I enjoy like some, every once in a while I'll do well on LinkedIn, but not that well. I don't know. But I do think it is something to do with business. Like it's fun to, and really as I get older, not that I'm like super old or anything, but 33 does feel kind of old to me. As I get older, I think I realize that the most important thing is to do something with people, that you enjoy. And I think I spent, especially with Parsity, for the initial period of it, I spent so much time just being solo that I was like, I don't care how great this is or how successful it is. Like, this isn't what I want to do. Like, I don't want to just be a solo forever, So.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, man. What were your other ideas of things we could talk about?
Well,
or is that it?
No. So kind of related note, I guess, with what we were talking about, like, well, I guess first of all, I don't, unfortunately don't have that many updates in terms of my own stuff. I mean, there's a few things like, just past 6,000 YouTube subscribers, which was cool.
Hey-o.
Yeah. Also not something I'm really paying attention to anymore, because kind of like the podcast, like the growth is just consistent. So it feels like in some ways less of a big milestone than when I hit 1,000, for example, and YouTube begins to let you monetize. On that note, I'm able to pay for my editor now, more or less, like with the AdSense revenue from the channel. So that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it was cool that it's kind of self-sustaining now. Depending on the day, it's kind of, it fluctuates. But on average, I think I'm about meeting her salary, which is cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but honestly, most of my updates are kind of from personal life. And in particular, I've started a few hobbies this fall, one of which I mentioned really briefly a few weeks ago. But I started taking a stand-up comedy class. And
no way.
Yeah, and that's been really
That's
interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways it intersects really well with a lot of the things that we talk about, just because it's very failure prone at the beginning, and even for people that are really experienced, and a big part of doing it is just embracing that. But I was thinking about like a few other things on that front, like our teacher. I was thinking about the idea of what it means to live the dream, basically, because a lot of people have these kind of artistic dreams or maybe sports or whatever, and I feel like there's varying levels of this, because our teacher is making a living as a full-time comedian. He's local here in Raleigh. Most people probably haven't heard of him, but he's doing what he wants to do, making a living at it.
Yeah.
And so I've started to think of all these examples, and part of it is that I have to write a newsletter this Sunday, because I write my newsletter first Sunday of the month. And I was thinking about this idea yesterday about, there's all these different things where if you want to do it, you can do it. It may not be at the highest level of success in the field, but like for our teacher, he's open for a lot of people you probably have heard of. He gets gigs here. As a comedian, I've been exposed to all these, and just being interested in comedy, all these different ways of doing it. So there's corporate events, there's churches, there's cruise ships, there's, all these different things, and you can kind of piece them together and make a living doing the thing if you want to. Of course you have to be good. You have to work at it. There's also like, sports. So like I went to a D1 college, but it was small. And every so often we'd have someone sign a European contract. And so they go overseas.
Oh, wow.
They're playing pro ball. They're making a living. And a lot of times Europe actually pays pretty well. But you're never going to hear of them most likely.
Yeah.
But they're doing the thing, right? And so kind of this idea of like, if you want to do the thing with a lot of these endeavors, there's a way to do it. You may not be well known or the most successful person ever, but if the passion is for doing the activity, then there are ways to make a living doing it, is kind of the idea that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. I haven't actually thought of that. I remember, another example of that is when I was in high school, I had a guitar teacher who like he's like an advanced lesson. Like you had to like go through 2 other instructors before you could get access to this guy.
The final
It was really
boss.
funny. So he's like, he was the final boss.
Yeah.
He was like the advanced guitar instructor. And, I was a jerk in high school. Not really. I was just a normal high schooler. So me and my friend would go to him, and we'd always like sort of make fun of him behind his back because, he was like in his 40s, but like still like rocking out, and his band, won this contest, like opened for Bon Jovi, which, we thought Bon Jovi was super corny, but he was like so stoked to open for Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
And I look back and I'm like, this dude is living his dream. Like he literally made a living, and I think he still does, like teaching people how to play guitar and like playing these big gigs. And I think his band was like regionally famous around Houston. But yeah, it does make you wonder. And, I've heard people talk about this a lot too, like the stat, like, some certain dollar point, you don't get any happier. And I'm sure that that's true. I think what's weird about all this business stuff that we're into is sort of money is like the token metric for success.
Yep.
But I think you could probably replace like that token metric. I think at some point, you need to know that you can make a living off of it. But, like your life does get more complex whenever you're trying to build these activities in as hobbies, as opposed to them like being the main thing, and it doesn't actually get that much better if you are trying to fill it with, this other stuff just for the sake of making money. I don't know. I love that idea though.
Yeah, it's interesting because kind of on that note, in jobs, the default reward is usually more money and also more responsibility. But I got to a point at my last job where I was like, I actually want a better lifestyle. I'm kind of at that point with money where it's not making a huge material difference in my day-to-day, which, of course, that's a privilege to be able to say that.
Sure.
But you kind of hit that inflection point where it's like, now I want to optimize for what does my life look like on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah, these examples of people that kind of get that intuitively and have made those decisions to do what they really want to be doing, even if they're having to kind of scrape together a living, I think is pretty cool. For me, it's inspiring. And I kind of have, I think, noted these things subconsciously, but being around people that are trying to do comedy has made me think about it a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that, man. That's crazy. So have you, what inspired you to like do the stand-up comedian thing? Or are you going to actually, do you have to do like an open mic night or something? I mean, what's the end goal?
Yeah. So whenever you take an improv class or a stand-up class, typically there's kind of a graduation show. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like for us because we started with 4 people. We're down to 2, which in some ways is awesome because we get more attention from our teacher. But since he's a local guy and knows comedians locally, he was saying last time, like, well, maybe we'll just put on like a real show and you guys will just be some of the performers and I'll bring my friends, which would be sick if it happens. I think that'll be in about a month or so. But I do have my first open mic this Friday in Durham. I'm excited about that. And yeah, I mean, the inspiration was, I think comedy content is just becoming like more and more prevalent. So Netflix has a ton of it. They're buying a ton of it. They have a whole YouTube channel and podcast devoted to it, which is called Netflix is a Joke. And so just, I think, repeated exposure and then starting to listen to some podcasts. So I listened to Nate Bargatze's podcast, and he has 3 other working comedians on with him where they're just talking about a little bit about what their lifestyle is like and what their day-to-day is like. And then they also discuss a topic. But just hearing these guys, like, what the process is like, I kind of realized, like, this is a craft like any other.
Yeah.
You suck at it at first, like most things, and you work on it, you get better. And I kind of thought, like, okay, well, you and I are always hammering this idea of, like, you can learn things, you can figure out things. And so I kind of thought, like, well, why don't I give this a shot? Seems like it'd be fun. So I just went for it. And it has been fun. It's been really interesting to think about what makes something funny, trying to figure out the structure of jokes and fit things together. It's kind of engineering-ish in a way. Like, you could kind of take that approach of a system. But, it's been cool.
Is there like a domain of topics that you like gravitate towards? Do you like write your own jokes or do you tell other jokes, by the way.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a sin in comedy to steal jokes. So the idea is you write your own. But yeah, I mean, of course, like I think you talk about your life is kind of the easiest thing. So like my first ideas or my upbringing, you know, my parents, my family. But also it's a little bit tricky because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. So I've kind of thrown out a few ideas to some of my family and they're like, no, don't do that. So I'm refining, but yeah, I mean, observational stuff, everyday life. I haven't tried to do any technology stuff yet, but I think it might be interesting to try and work in developer stuff, but also that's kind of for, you know, maybe a little bit more particular audience, but we'll see. I think the chunk I'm going to do this Friday is about, so I may have talked about on here, my wife's family runs a summer camp. At summer camp, everything has to be super high energy all the time, but I'm pretty flat. And so it's about how that's kind of hard. It's hard for me to fit in. So I'm going to go with that. I think this Friday and see what happens.
I just can just picture a sign. What's the deal with summer camps?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect.
So many kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
You probably don't use Seinfeld's voice.
No, but I think what you take from, so I started watching Seinfeld as well, and I never got it. But now that I'm doing comedy, I'm like, okay, like I like, you kind of see like something happens in his everyday life, it makes it into his bit. That's kind of what it looks like a little bit. So I just have like a running list on the notes app on my phone where if I see something, I'm like, well, I could work on that. So
man, that probably makes your life just so much more enjoyable too. It's like make these observations about your day that are like, how is this funny? You know, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. So that's one thing. I don't know did you have anything you wanted to talk about? We can maybe edit this out.
No, I like the comedy stuff.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think I have anything new, man. It's, you know, I'm still encouraged by, I think despite what everyone's saying about the economy and recession, I'm still seeing people get jobs. There was one person, and I don't want to call him out because it's his story, but there was a guy who, PhD student, who entered in an early on cohort and had like a medical emergency basically where he had to leave the program. And it was the first time that we had to think about, well, how do we structure stuff like that? And since, you know, Parsity by and large is asynchronous in terms of like the curriculum and content, the policy was like, well, just come back whenever you want. You know, like there's no failure. Like you can't fail unless like you're just, you know, there's a few instances where people realize that this is not for them. Other than that, like you just cannot fail. Mm-hmm. And he, so he like delayed for a long time and then came back and we said, okay, do you want to pick up where you left off? And he said, no, I want to redo it over again. We're like, well, I guess, can we do that? And like we consulted our little rule book that we don't have. We're like, yeah, you can do that. And so I just saw that he recently got a job as a software engineer because he came in, he endured for a long time, had to leave, started all the way back over, and then just landed his first job as a software engineer. So that was really encouraging to me that, and I'm not trying to like brag about Parsity and how awesome it is, but it was just really cool because in the past, whenever I would have had an in-person boot camp, if you would have had like a medical emergency and had to leave, like that's it. Like you're screwed. You know, there's no coming back from that. You know, what are you going to do? You know? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's probably like just one small win and update. You know, people are still getting jobs. You just have to hustle hard. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that about the way that we do it because when I went through coding boot camp, it was like, it felt like so risky. First of all, this was 6 years ago and it was more expensive than Parsity is now, which is cool. So the fact that we're able to offer it less expensively, it's more forgiving in terms of the policies. Like in terms of ours, it was like you had 3 weeks to do your final project. And if it didn't check every box at that point, it was like game over. You don't graduate and you don't get career services. And like maybe you could kind of circle back around and fix some stuff, but it was kind of like it's moved on without you almost.
Yeah.
And also like, yeah, I mean, at any point along the way, if you kind of got behind, it was basically impossible to catch up. And yeah, so the whole thing was super stressful. I think hopefully the way that we do it is less stressful for students.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's people who want that kind of like high stress structure, you know, and we do provide structure, but you know, like life just doesn't work that way, especially whenever you're doing the most difficult thing that you've ever done,
Right.
which is change careers. But yeah, man, I think that's all I had.
Cool. I have one more idea if you want to discuss it, but we can also go.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. Have you heard of The Second Mountain? It's a book.
No.
Okay, so this is David Brooks. He's a conservative columnist for the New York Times. And he wrote this book, I think it's about 2 years old, that I'm reading. And it's making me think a lot. And basically the idea is there's kind of two mountains in terms of your life and career. First mountain is basically self-focused, where you're kind of out for yourself, your own self-actualization, your own happiness. And then there's a valley in between them. Something happens, like you attain what you wanted, it wasn't as satisfying as you thought, or you have a health crisis, or someone in your life that you're close to passes away. Something basically, some kind of tragedy happens where it puts things in a whole new life. You're in the valley, then you climb the second mountain, which is more focused on serving others. And he kind of contrasts happiness and joy, happiness being, momentary, like for myself, joy being this like deep abiding, sense of purpose. And there's like, he defines it better than I'm doing right now, but it's made me think about kind of this whole thing that, I've been doing my career. Because the reality is like with a lot of the stuff I'm doing, it's like, I just wanted to do it, or I thought it'd be more fun to do it the way that I'm doing it, or I'd have more freedom. And like, to be sure, a lot of the things that I found from this arrangement have been great. I want to take with me, like, having more autonomy, having more flexibility in the schedule, stuff like that. But there is an aspect of it where it's like, it feels a little bit self-serving and also empty because of that. And so I'm curious, like, obviously we have students that we serve through Parsity, and it's cool to see them change careers. For most people, it makes a massive difference in their life in terms of their satisfaction, how engaged they are at work, the amount of money they make. So we have service there, I think. But I'm curious how you think about baking in serving other people to the work that you're doing.
Like the work I'm personally doing?
Or just like how you approach career, or like how you think about things.
Yeah. Okay. So to clarify, you're saying that if the first mountain, assuming I've already climbed that one, and now I'm on mountain number 2, and real joy comes from serving others. Yeah, I think I'm actually kind of sort of in a crisis, not a crisis, that's a deep word for it, but probably a turning point for my own career in terms of like, who am I serving? Because I think you're right. It's funny to think about it now. It's like for the longest time when I started doing coding boot camps, I really just wanted to do something that worked, Right. And then very quickly people started getting jobs, and it did transform into the addiction. Man, I think I wrote about this sometime recently where I was basically implying that like whenever you help someone else and there's an outcome in their life, and a friend of mine said that like to me like this, he goes, I want my fruit to grow on your tree, which sounds kind of like a weird phrase, but what he means is like that the fruit of your life doesn't necessarily make your life bigger and better. The fruit of your life is that someone else around you has, an improvement in their life. And so I think for the longest time for me, it has been, people becoming software engineers. But I think the deeper part of that is just an extension of my own story, which was whenever I became a software engineer, and in my case, it was graduating college with a religious studies degree, not being able to like have much of a future where it didn't seem like it was viable for me to be able to provide for a family one day. And really, I felt, to be honest, I was like massively depressed. I've talked about that before on the podcast. But now being able to provide that other like extra step of vision for people where they can now attach to that, I think is it. But then I think I've also like my philosophy has grown so much because I believe in a lot of other things. Like I think the things you're talking about too, about work, that it doesn't end there. Like where you get a job as a software engineer and like now you're super happy because you work from home, you drink lattes. It then moves forward with the next phase, which is in some ways helping others. Seems like a pretty generic way of saying it. But what it really is it's some way of where you're like multiplying yourself, right? Like you're taking the journey that you went through and you're multiplying it. And so in a selfish sense, it's like you're having impact and you get to feel the rewards of that impact.
Right.
And I think that's probably for me, like the thing I think about is like, what's the impact I'm having? And I think, I think it will turn into something to do with people generating their own income, besides W-2 work. Like that's the thing that I've like really come into, which is, not that I, obviously there's that happening in my life too. But, I think this idea that like, hey, you being able to generate your own income means that you never have to be stuck or scared, financially at least, again. So I think that's probably the next frontier for me. I don't know if that answered your question. That was a long-winded answer.
No, I got it. Yeah. So I think there's like two ways of doing this, right? It's kind of like having impact on my own life or having impact for other people's lives. Maybe both are so a little bit inherently selfish. It's kind of like that. It's a philosophical question or whatever, like, is all altruism inherently selfish?
Yeah.
Probably yes, to a certain extent, because it feels good when you're helping other people. But I think that's probably more admirable long-term, as opposed to like, I'm just out for myself and making my own life better.
Yeah, for sure. I think one more note I'd have about that, and I'm sure you'd feel similarly, that, and I always like write this too, because this was sort of an aha I had whenever we moved to Israel to start like this, like the first kind of entrepreneurial journey I went on. And I found myself like just grinding, 80, 90 hour weeks. And the realization was, regardless of how awesome I do in any of this, I will never impact anyone as much as I'll impact my kids, right? Like,
right.
I'm like the only dad they're ever going to have. I mean, hopefully. I'm the only dad they'll ever have. But the people that we help with like this coding stuff, I hope it transforms their lives. But I'm not going to like, be standing at their wedding.
Right.
I won't be there for their big moments. It's so at the end of the day, I like sort of swing on this pendulum back and forth between like my career is super important, it's valuable, I'm like changing people's lives, and I just want to provide for my family and like just be there every moment I can for my kids. So I kind of like I want both of those things, and I know you do too. Like that's sort of like I think the thing that propelled you to do what you're doing now, which is super cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I'm on board with that. It's like with the time we are spending in work, let's use it for good.
You're going to.
But we, there's this whole other part of life as well. Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. We don't have kids yet, but when we do, I want to be extremely present and dialed into what my kids are doing. So, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, family in general, and it's true. Like my kids are going to school, so they don't want me around all day.
Just knock on the window.
Yep.
Cool. All right.
That's it?
Yeah, I think that's all I got for this one.
All right, man. Good to talk to you, Peter. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man. See you soon.
All right, that does it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you want to learn more about our online code school, Parsity, visit parsity.io. That's parsity.io. And we can make you a software engineer within the next 4 to 6 to 9, however long it takes you to learn this stuff. We're going to help you get there. So visit there to learn more. Additionally, we have some other shameless plugs in the show notes. Peter's got a course on Udemy that will take you from being a junior developer to being a senior. We've got Dev 30, which is a 30-day cohort-based JavaScript course that will help you to work on your skills, your habits, your network, and your mindset over the course of 30 days to figure out if becoming a software engineer is right for you. And that's all, folks. We'll see you next week.